The master plan is laid out around a new legible network of streets with 2 vehicular connections to St Anne's Road at the east and west end of the site. Residential uses are predominant on the ground floor, with communal lobbies and front doors activating the new streets. This diagram shows the proposed cycle and pedestrian movement throughout the site. The red line shows the major move of a new cycle and pedestrian route from Chestnuts Park through to Warwick Gardens and Green Lanes, made possible by a new link proposed through the woodland in the southwest corner. This new connection through the site improves transport accessibility and contributes to the wider green grid. Careful consideration has been given to the scale and massing of the proposals. The top section is taken east-west, with Warwick Gardens shown on the right and the existing hospital buildings shown on the left. 3-storey terrace housing is proposed adjacent to the existing residential terraces, with the proposed building heights gently rising to the centre of the site. The bottom section cuts north-south, with the railway on the left and St Anne's Road on the right. Again, you can see the proposals place the greatest heights towards the railway and drop down to low-rise terrace housing within the conservation area. So looking now at the conservation area, which you can see indicated by the orange line at the top of this slide. In terms of new buildings, we have short terrace of 2 to 3-storey houses that sit back from the historic wall along St Anne's Road. In terms of the retained buildings, 4 of the 7 sit within the conservation area, and alterations are also proposed to the historic wall to better improve permeability and connections into the site. Our approach looks to be sensitive in terms of both scale, massing and materiality to the conservation area. The top elevation is of the historic wall seen from St Anne's Road, where we have new terrace houses set back and the taller buildings set even further into the site. 2 new vehicular entrances are proposed through the wall at the east and west, with pedestrian openings proposed to the Peace Garden. The first view on the bottom left is of the eastern site entrance, where we are creating a new open space and a new entrance to Mulberry House. And the second view is looking towards the Peace Garden section of the wall seen from St Anne's Road. You can see the proposed opens of windows and doorways which form visual and pedestrian links into the Peace Garden whilst preserving the historic sense of enclosure. Next. In terms of the retained buildings, our design approach seeks to preserve the significance and setting of these assets while giving them a new lease of life through non-residential uses. Here you can see a view to the Peace Building looking south from the Peace Garden, where you can see how the building is firmly embedded in the green heritage of the site. The view shows one of the 2 new contemporary single-storey extensions which are proposed to the building in red precast concrete, referencing the red stonework found locally and on site. I'll now hand over to Ed, who'll talk through the detailed design.
Oh, hi everyone. I'll keep this very quick because I know it's late. So I'm just going to highlight where the phase 1 detailed application is. So this 3D aerial view shows the whole site. So that'll be an outline planning consent together with a detailed planning consent shown, Chris, on the next slide. So you can sort of see that area highlighted there. So it includes a series of buildings, a series of low-rise 3-storey houses to the boundary, and it also includes the enlarged Peace Garden shown in the centre there, together with the existing buildings. And now we'll show you some proposed CGI views of this detailed planning consent. So if we skip to the next one, Chris. This first view here is of the entrance to the site from St Anne's Road. And you can see this forms a really welcoming entrance to this brand new neighbourhood. And you can also see in this view that the houses there in the foreground have pitched roofs and dormer windows which respond to the adjacent conservation area. And now we'll flip to the next view, please, Chris. And here, this view is looking south immediately as you enter the site. And in this image, you can see the real quality of the buildings. You can see the elegant brick and balcony detailing to the buildings. And you can see how the different tones of brickwork bring a variety and richness to the scheme. And now we'll flip to the next one, Chris. So this is a view from the top of the Peace Garden, so that's that large garden at the centre of the site. Again, we're looking south, and you can see the facades of Building C, which are elegantly composed of paired balconies, and they also have generous windows. You can also in this image see the richness of the landscaping and also the retained mature trees. If we flip to the next slide. So this is a view looking south along the generous new Western Street. On the right-hand side of the image, you can see the 3-storey terraced houses. You can also see in this image how the retained buildings, like the water tower you can see in the middle of the image, bring so much uniqueness and richness to this master plan. And now we'll flip to the next CGI view. So this view describes one of the tallest buildings on the master plan, which is 9 stories, and that's located at the centre of the master plan, away from the neighbouring properties. In front of the building, you can see this generous open space, which is characterised by a number of retained mature existing trees. And on the left-hand side there, you can see the way you get a view through to some retained buildings like the water tower. And now we'll go to the next view. So again, this view is of the same 9-storey building we just saw, and you can see that this is viewed across the Peace Garden, and you can see the scale, the width and generosity of this publicly accessible green space in the image. and it really shows you that this is a landscape-led design approach. And then we'll look at the final image. And so here, this is a view from the top of the Peace Garden near the site entrance, looking southwest. And you can really, again, see the quality and the generosity of this public open space, and how the heights of the buildings sit very comfortably and elegantly as a backdrop to this space. And that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Just very quickly, we can discuss things like parking, sustainability, trees. If you have any queries on that, we wanted to basically give you an overview just there before any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So questions, comments from the committee. I've got Councillor White first.
Thanks. I've actually got a number of questions, but I'll start with a couple and see if anybody else brings up any of the other things I wanted to ask about. So first of all, I wondered if there's any possibility of reconsidering the location of the main vehicle entrance, which is, I think, in the northwest corner of the site, which is very close to a junction between Black Boy Lane and St Anne's Road. Obviously, that's quite a busy junction, and concerns have been raised by residents about the safety of that junction to pedestrians. If obviously, having the main vehicle entrance will contribute to that. If that's not possible, then any mitigation that can be done by the council, what thought's been put into that, and whether it's possible to achieve anything like that through Section 106 condition. Second, I know residents of Warwick Gardens have raised concerns about having tall buildings overlooking their homes. I'd just like some clarity on what's been done during the development of the proposals for the site to address their concerns, to maybe amend the plans. I know that they've been asking for the tall buildings to be moved further away to the hospital side of the site. So what's been done to allay their concerns and maybe amend the plans? And finally, I'm just wondering what, obviously I'm pleased to see the plans for cycling and walking routes east-west, and also potential for north-south and cross the railway line at some point in the future. But is it also possible to get some Section 106 money to get some safe cycling routes around the perimeter of the site, for instance, on St Anne's Road? So those are my initial 3 questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much for those. Just in terms of the access first, off St Anne's Road, this has been mooted several times during the design evolution of the scheme. You're right, it is relatively close. If we were to move it further west, it would be a problem with the ambulance station. Any further right, then you move into quite a dense area, well, actually further towards the junction that's there at the moment going up La Rose Lane, but also into quite a dense amount of foliage within the conservation area. In terms of safety, we will be, or we have undertaken kind of safety audits on this new access as well, and that'll be included within the transport statement. So we're confident that it is the best access, main access to the site, and we're confident that we can mitigate that through strong scheme design and highway design. In terms of tall buildings, I'll just defer to the scheme architects.
Thanks, Rob. So in terms of the tallest building on phase 1A, which is a 9-storey building, that's located close to the centre of the site, so furthest away from the residents of Warwick Gardens, and the distance there is circa 90 metres from Warwick, the back of Warwick Gardens properties, to the tall building. It does vary slightly depending on the properties along Warwick Gardens, but it's circa 90 metres. It's also worth pointing out that the tallest building has been located closest to open space as possible, so it's next to the Peace Garden, but it's also next to a new open space around a retained tree, which is the veteran spotted thorn, which is a TPO and an important tree on site, so it's got the most open space around it, and the building footprint has been reduced to retain this tree. In terms of alternative locations for this building, Warwick Gardens residents have asked the question of why it couldn't be located closer to the hospital edge. As part of the design process, we did look at alternative locations for this tall building. One of the reasons is that it's, in terms of overshadowing, it's in an optimum location for not overshadowing new buildings, but it's also been part of quite a specific phasing requirement and a requirement for a certain number of homes per phase and a certain tenure per phase. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Rachel. Just moving back to kind of cycling and walking routes through the site, and I may bring the applicant in on this one as well. I think we're really committed to making this as walkable and cyclable, if that's even a word, as possible. The inclusion of what we're terming the Southwest Link is a key part of the proposals, which is going to be included within phase 1A. So that's the link from the main bit of the master plan site through to Warwick Gardens. We think that's a really strong feature of the scheme. In terms of cycling and walking routes around the site, I'm just going to defer to the applicant on that because we are currently reviewing options there.
All right, can I just confirm, is the question about cycling routes around the interior of the site or along St Anne's Road itself?
I'm just wondering whether there's any possibility of gaining through section 106.
I see. Yeah.
For instance, a safe cycling route on St Anne's Road. Yeah,
well, we're very open to that. We're in early stages of talking about 106 terms with the council. I think the council have their own plans for a cycling route along St Anne's Road, so we want to dovetail with that. So yes.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Buxton, then I've got Councillor Rice and Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. So my question perhaps also reflects, also might call in a relevant officer as well. The site has a lot of green space, and I'll leave it to the relevant environment officer to classify how much. My question is more to do with, it all seems quite passive in terms of its walking and cycling, and residents have access to outdoor spaces, but there seem to be few opportunities to, say, kick a ball about. And I know Chestnut Park is opposite, that's why I might defer to an officer as well. What thought has been given to outdoor activities, you know, football, tennis, open air gyms that can bring a bit of life, let's say?
Yeah, thanks. Really, really good question, and a source of debate through how the scheme has evolved. I think the thought process with the St Anne's new neighbourhood site is how it dovetails in with Chestnuts Park and doesn't actually compete with that space there. I think what Chestnut Park offers is a large amount of green open space, and within the St Anne's new neighbourhood scheme, which is kind of just across the road, will be a different type of space. Will be much greener in terms of the species, the planting, the trees that will be located there. There will be more intricate spaces provided across both the detailed and the outline part of the site. And then there'll be subject to discussions with the council about St Anne's Road, potential improvements to crossing St Anne's Road for safe access, especially for older children, 13 to kind of 18-year-olds play being provided on Chestnuts Park. So that's kind of the design ethos between that, working with Chestnuts Park, providing a different type of open space offering.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Yeah, sorry. Interested in what's going to happen to the wall. I mean, the perimeter wall has probably been there as long as all the buildings on the site have been there. So what's going to happen to that wall? And the water tower, I see is included next to some housing. Is it going to be just a water tower, a previous water tower, nothing more? Is any activity going to be connected with the water tower?
Great, thanks, Councillor Rice. So to start with the wall, you're absolutely right. It's a really beautiful wall which surrounds the existing site. So it's part of the original hospital, and we're maintaining that wall. So we're keeping the wall, but there are a number of new openings in the wall to provide access to the site, and we are also through some of the consultation that we did with the local community, we're also creating some openings in that wall for visual permeability, so you can see into the site and see what's behind the wall, because currently it's a high wall and you can't actually sort of see behind it. But we're maintaining the wall, but there are a number of new openings in the wall to allow to enter the sites for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists.
But excuse me, has the wall not got a listing on it? Surely it must have by now.
No, the wall doesn't have a listing on it. No, but we do recognise the importance of it in the conservation area, and that's been very much the focus of treating that boundary, is to acknowledge and appreciate that boundary wall, despite it isn't listed. It does make a positive contribution towards the conservation area.
Councillor Bevan.
There was also a question on the water tower, which we can quickly answer.
Yes, please. Okay.
Yep. So again, with our client Catalyst and Hill, we sort of consulted extensively with the local community, including sort of a design group looking at sort of different uses. So a number of ideas for that space came up, including things like a climbing wall. However, given it is an unusual building, we are looking at a sort of correct me here, Rob, with the terminology and planning in terms of use class, but is it sui generis use?
Yeah, so we're looking at a range of different options within various planning use classes. So we'd be covering it under a broader consent of different use class E, F, F1 and F2 to give a bit of a range of flexibility there. I think the proposals for the water tower are ongoing. That is likely to come online a bit later in slightly later phases, even though we've drawn up the detail within phase 1A. So I think there's a lot of potential there for the local community to be involved in what could potentially happen there as an end use.
But it is a it's a non-residential use, so we're not proposing it as residential.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, it's the water tower that attracts everyone's attention when you go around the site. They're more interested in the water tower than the housing, to be quite honest. So I think it's quite crucial when you come forward with further plans that you try to resolve that. Like it could be a revolving restaurant, a party place on the top, and corporate use at the top, which would pay a lot of money, which would subsidise some social use as well. I think it's really crucial that you try and solve that issue. And then my other concern is, with all the different providers of housing, as this scheme progresses in phases, that we get different maintenance standards, different cleaning standards in the areas and different park maintenance standards. So how would you plan to resolve that issue and ensure that doesn't happen?
Shall I take that one? Yes.
Yeah.
Very good question. So I'm David Wakefield, I'm the project director for St Anne's from Catalyst Housing Group, where a housing association will be the applicant. So we will own and manage the site for the next 250 years or so. So we will manage everything on site ourselves. The one slight exception of that could be if Haringey do take up their option. It's likely that Haringey would be responsible for the internal parts of the blocks that they purchase. Does that answer your question? And then the water tower, I completely agree. It's a fantastic building, isn't it? Everyone talks about it. It's fiendishly difficult to renovate, and it's actually very small. The footprint of it is it's really quite small. So, as Ed says, there's been a range of interest. It will be a very quirky, it'll be a fantastic building when it's done. It's going to be a quirky user. When we market it, I'm sure we'll get some unusual uses in there, and it's going to be a great building.
Thank you. Councillor Corley-Harrison?
Thanks. Just a quick follow-on question there. If the council does take up the option, who would cover the cost of the service charge related to those properties? And then my main question, which is related to the design and why the decision on the taller buildings to go with kind of the new London style design when, you know, that location and surrounding locations, there's very detailed designs, it's pitched roofs, you know, there's the mix of the buff and the red bricks, all of that sort of thing. It's quite a contrast to that. So the kind of the thinking behind that, and then also the thinking behind the different massing, the different stories of the buildings. Why up to 9? Why not higher? And similarly on the other staggered buildings, why did you come to the decisions that you've come to, which has led to the kind of, I suppose, number of units that you've come to?
Great, thank you. I mean, it's a very good question. Chris, if you could actually possibly flick back one or two images, maybe go forward one actually. So this sort of shows the facade of the tallest building, which, as you can see, I think at 9 stories there, it sits very comfortably. In terms of the design rationale, what we tried to do here was we located the balconies on the corners. And so you can see that central bay of the building reads as one piece. So that helps it feel more slender and tall and elegant. And I think in terms of materials and richness, there's a lot of variety between the different buildings. Yes, it is quite subtle in places, but we've not applied one design to all the buildings. We've really carefully considered the settings of all the buildings and the compositions of all the facades. And we've taken cues from some of the fantastic, rich heritage buildings that are on the site themselves. And I really feel that this is a fantastic piece of contextual contemporary architecture that really goes way beyond the sort of standard London vernacular you really see. And, you know, I really am proud to have been part of this project. And I think I speak for the whole team on that.
Thank you. Councillor Hymas, you had your hand up earlier. You should have registered, but if you do want to speak, I can allow...
Sorry, Chair. I did have another question which wasn't answered. It was on who pays the service. That's all right.
Oh, sorry.
Who would pay the
Sorry.
service if the council took up the option? That's all right.
Yeah, so
Sorry, I'm confusing everyone. I do apologise. Could you just...
Yeah, I was going to step in with that. Didn't want to end with such a boring question after Red's design speech. So, yeah, service charge, very simple answer really. The owner of the building would be responsible for service charge.
Right. Did you want to speak, Councillor Hymas?
Yeah, I think, like you being here, I wasn't quite sure.
Do you want to sit where there's a microphone? And you've got 3 minutes. You can have 3 minutes to speak. You are.
Yeah, you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't have 3 minutes of things to say, but I will say what I have to say anyway, which is I wanted just to speak about specifically the car parking provision, because as I understand, there's going to be 167 car parking spaces with a maximum of 10% of these for disabled people. And I know that under kind of the current GLA London plan, that the premise should be that they start with a car-free development and go from there. So on that basis, it feels like there's 150 odd car parking spaces that require some form of justification. And I say that specifically because the hospital site, as has been mentioned, is extremely well connected to Turnpike Lane, Seven Sisters and Green Lanes. So I think that we should really be encouraging walking and cycling wherever possible. And I know that also, the council itself is looking at changing its plans around what kind of proportion of what's the ratio of houses to car parking spaces on a development. And clearly, even if we move to electric cars, there's all sorts of damages that still come from those cars, whether that's PM 2.5s or just the general safety issues that come with car driving. And I think it's also a kind of social justice point in that point, not just for the air pollution, but also because, as we've said, it's going to be 60% affordable. So you would have thought that the majority of people who are in social homes don't own cars, particularly in Tottenham, where there's an even lower car ownership rate. So again, 167 seems totally out of proportion with how many people are likely to have cars. So that seems to me like it's encouraging car use rather than pushing back against it. So yeah, I guess that is an opportunity with the car parking space to have less of that, and then those through routes that we've talked about, could they be safer as well? Could we also have more greenery, more trees, more biodiversity where there was going to be car parking spaces? And finally, St Anne's is getting a low traffic neighbourhood, and that's something I'm supportive of. It does then seem strange to then put 160 odd car parking spaces next to somewhere where we're putting quite drastic measures in to make sure that people don't drive and don't cause further air pollution. And we also have 2 schools on either side of the site. We've got Chestnuts on one side, and then you have St Anne's Primary on the other. And again, we're trying to put in school streets in both of those schools to try and reduce traffic. And it seems like this development hasn't taken on board what the kind of local neighbourhood and what people in my ward are feeling at the moment around traffic. So I think that would be important to address. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hymas.
Great. Thank you very much for those questions. If I just take the car point, circa 167 car parking spaces are proposed. That equates to approximately 0.17 of parking spaces per home. In a relatively low public transport accessibility area, which is going to improve with the creation of the South West Link. That is, it's relatively low. I would say there are going to be circa 1,000 new dwellings on the site. The London plan policy for accessible spaces, without going into too much detail, proposes between kind of 3 and 7%, but potentially up to 10. So that could take you up to 100 accessible spaces, depending on how that policy is interpreted and how discussions go with the local council. There are also also there are also 17% 3-bed and 4-bed homes across the site, and we would generally expect some of those larger homes to occasionally require kind of access to a vehicle. There is also a requirement for vehicles that people use for work as well. So that's something that has been discussed. I think when we've had these conversations with Haringey's officers, they've actually been slightly more supportive of a increase in car spaces across the site. We feel we've probably about got the balance right with about 0.17. That's supplemented by car clubs, and it's also supplemented by the transport assessment that we're undertaking, which very much puts walking and cycling at the top of the transport priority hierarchy there as well. We hope that we've got the balance about right here with 167. They'll be allocated through a quite a detailed car parking management plan that will be submitted with the planning application. So that's probably what I can say just at the moment, but there will be further details on how we've reached that kind of decision within the planning application submission documents that will be kind of available fairly shortly on the council's website. I didn't know if there was anything from the applicant that they wanted to add or not.
Yes, I'll just add one point. I actually really quite agree with what you said. I cycle everywhere. I fully support the idea of car-free developments, but to get, as Rob says, 0.17 is actually genuinely quite brave. To get truly car-free is almost unheard of, I would say. So 10% of those 90 spaces have to be for blue badge holders. The one thing I do want to just leave you with is that we won't be selling the parking spaces. So Catalyst will manage the estate. So in the future, if car usage does drop, then we can convert those spaces to other uses, you know, greenery and things like that.
Thank you. You should have registered, but I will allow you to speak. You have 3 minutes. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Holly. I'm one of the new ward councillors for St Anne's. I'll try and be really quick. I know everyone wants to go to bed. So my first question was about the district energy network that's mentioned in the papers. I wanted to know what other developments need to happen around, and are there any specific technology changes that we're waiting on for that to be useful? What else needs to change in the area for that to actually work? And then relating to that, residents have been in touch about solar panels on the development, encouraging us to push for more solar panels on the development, particularly on the homes that don't have them. So it would be useful to know what the thinking is there around solar panels on those houses. And then also the impact on the residents who live especially close to the new entrance onto Warwick Gardens. So I understand that they've been in touch around safety concerns. It'd be useful to know what is planned there in that corner.
I'll come in quickly, if that's okay, Chair, on the decentralised energy network, as that's sort of a wider project than the applicant is able to answer. So the decentralised energy network, or DEN, is a council project that's been looked at. There was a cabinet decision in December 2021, which approved an outline business case for a sort of almost borough-wide network, starting off with Tottenham Hale and Wood Green, with the potential to link through further south to the St Anne's development, and potentially even further to Hackney, the border with Hackney Council. So there is a wider project on there, and there's a cabinet report that I'd refer you to from December 2021. And in terms of technology, it is, you know, cutting edge technology. It's the direction of travel is very much decentralized energy, particularly when we look at energy prices as well, and making sure that residents have an affordable and low carbon and sustainable energy supply. So it's slightly wider than one individual scheme can address, but that is actively being looked at between officers and the applicant on the DEN, and I'll let the applicant come back on the other questions that you raised. Thank you.
Thanks. So very briefly, just on the Den, just in relation to St Anne's, rather than the kind of wider borough narrative, is that we will make provision should a connection come through to St Anne's to connect into that. In the interim period, we're proposing air source heat pumps supplemented by solar PV, so solar photo panels on roofs. So that's our approach at the moment, and we're working with officers at the moment to discuss the exact provisions of how we may connect into a network should one come forward. So that's our position at the moment, kind of on the Den. There was another one on PV, which I might ask you to. Yeah.
So at the moment, our scheme, you'll see when it comes forward in the energy strategy, it's got a considerable amount of PV on most of the available roof space. Don't have the figures to hand right now, but it's all contained within our energy strategy with indicative PV layouts as well. So you'll see there's a fairly substantial amount proposed.
Okay, thank you. Oh.
The last question was about road safety at the entrance to the St Anne's site off St Anne's Road, sort of to the western side near Warwick Gardens. Is that correct?
No, I was referring to the new entrance onto Warwick Gardens.
Right, yeah, so this is the pedestrian and cycle link at the southwestern corner of the site. So again, I think it's a very good question. We have it's important to say that link actually really helps connect the sites to the adjacent network, and it will really benefit the wider community, not just the sort of new residents on the site. So that's a borough-wide move that should really benefit the wider community. It's really important that it's safe, and we've had various meetings with the Secure by Design officer. So that's the local sort of DOCO, or designing out crime officer, and he is well aware of the quite legitimate concerns about some of the adjacent residents have, and through good lighting, good passive design, so really good desire lines, clear lines of sight, we've adopted sort of really good passive-led principles. But I think some of the detail there will need to sort of be worked through at some of the technical design stages. But we're certainly continuing our consultation with the local police to make sure not just that part of the site, but the whole site is a really safe place to live.
Okay, thank you. So any final questions or comments from the committee? No? Okay. So thank you. Item 12 and item 13, if you have any questions, if you can contact the officers separately on that. There are no new items of urgent business, which is item 14. And item 15, date of next meeting is 14th of June 2022. So I thereby close the meeting. Thank you.